From the high desert in the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening or good morning, as the case may be. It's great to be here, better here than Puerto Rico, where the winds are screaming. I talked to Seth Shostak, who's not in Puerto Rico right now, because he said, well, we watched this thing churning across the Atlantic Ocean. I talked to him about 10 minutes ago, and he said, at the time, the wind gusts were around 200 miles an hour, and he said Arecibo itself was only meant to withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds. And so that's it. We packed up, they closed up, we got out of there. SETI is obviously not manning the Arecibo telescope at the moment. As a matter of fact, probably all you would see would be boarded up windows and that sort of thing, with hurricanes screaming through the island. There are already 3 dead in Puerto Rico. To the business at hand, Richard C. Hoagland was an advisor to Walter Cronkite, science advisor. He was at one time a science advisor, or advisor to NASA, where they now have large busts of him in the halls. People still salute as they walk by. He has been an investigator into things uncommon, but scientific for a very long time. He's on to a lot of really interesting stuff. And Tom Bearden are both coming. Tom Bearden, let me tell you just a little bit of what I know. He is a retired Army colonel, and what he is going to tell you tonight, a lot of it's going to be presented in the guise of theory and fiction. But I'm telling you all, listen to what Tom Bearden says very carefully, because I'm told, read between the lines, because most of what you're going to hear is real. It is being presented in the manner that it is, probably to avoid people going to jail or something. So welcome to you too.
Good evening, Art.
That would be the voice of Richard C. Hoagland in New Mexico.
Hi, Art.
And that would be the voice of Tom Bearden, a physicist with a big black ops background. And so as I point, is that a fair characterization, Tom, I gave of the information you're going to present, or should I retract it?
Well, it'll be just a little bit different. First of all, I'm not really a physicist. I'm a nuclear engineer.
Okay.
And second, not really in the deep black so much. I had some intelligence assignments, but mostly in technical intelligence. In other words, we worked on what the other guys had and what we thought they might have. So
okay. Well, but if that's not black ops, then what is?
Well, it got into that area, but I'm not the type that out in the field.
Okay.
Sneaky Pete type.
I know, I understand that. But I mean, I said, as we talk about some of the technical things we're going to talk about this morning, we'll present it as theory or fiction.
They're black enough, that's for sure.
Okay, that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted to know. Richard, where should we begin?
Well, let me try to give some context. You and, of course, the audience and Tom know for a long time, I've been looking at this field I term hyperdimensional physics, which most people, they stop me right there and they say, what in the world is a hyperdimensional? And so tonight, let me define it, all right? We know what dimensional is. We know what length and width and height is in the normal 3 dimensions of our existence. You know, living room furniture has a length, a width, and a height.
Yeah.
Freezers have length, width, and height, and all that.
Yeah.
Supposedly, there is a 4th dimension of time, which Einstein gave us via general and special relativity. But before that, back in the last century, in the 19th century, there were a group of scientists, physicists, mathematicians, and others, who were really playing around and toying around and thinking long and hard about more than 3 spatial dimensions, and therefore the term hyper. Anything that's hyper is beyond or above normal. So hyperdimensional means beyond 3 normal dimensions.
Okay.
And hyperdimensional physics means a physics which must encompass more than 3 normal spatial dimensions to be on the way to completeness, to be a unified model, a real model of reality. Well, many years ago, my interest centered on Tom Bearden because he was one of the few people, I mean really few people, that I encountered on the lecture circuit who was actually talking, A, about hyperdimensional physics, although I don't think, Tom, you used the term in those days.
I did early on, yes.
Okay, well, I caught you.
It's a good term.
You were into the scalar phase of your discussions at the point I caught you.
Right.
And then the other thing that Tom did was he introduced me to the real Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell, who can be considered the father of modern non-relativistic physics. I mean, when you say the name Einstein, everybody thinks relativity. But when you say to most technical people and physicists and engineers the name Maxwell, they think of everything up to Einstein. So those two people are kind of like the super icons of the foundation of the world we think we inhabit in terms of science. Well, Tom introduced me to some pretty interesting things about Maxwell that I didn't know, and I'm sure that most other physicists don't know, namely that the Maxwell that we read about is not the Maxwell that really existed. It is a version. It is a kind of a 2D cardboard cutout of the extraordinary multi-dimensional universe that Maxwell and his colleagues were playing with, imagining, working with, trying to model, trying to predict scientific facts from.
Well, even modern-day theoretical physicists, best minds in the nation, like Michio Kaku, who I interview all the time, almost thinks that a number of universes or parallel universes are passé. I mean, he's so accepted the fact that they exist.
Well, it has come back a long circle to where the idea of multidimensionality as a solution to the big problems of science, the big problems of physics, is once again in. It's once again de rigueur. But the difference is that where Kaku and his colleagues talk about 26 dimensions or 10 dimensions, and you can't test them. There's no laboratory test you can propose that will decide whether their models, their hyperdimensional models, are real, because it would literally take more energy than there exists probably in one-half the known universe.
And he admits that.
Okay. The Maxwell multidimensional models we have discovered through Enterprise, through the work that I and my colleagues have been doing, and that then impinges directly on what Tom Bearden was going to talk about tonight, is incredibly, eminently, and blatantly testable. And that's where the two pathways, the two thinking processes, radically diverge.
All right, I want to stop and say something to my audience now. For a lot of them, this seems like a bit much, but you have an extensive presentation paper now on your website about hyperdimensional physics, and I need to tell my audience that even people who hate your guts, Richard, and there are...
You sound like Bill Clinton.
There are a few. Actually, Clinton may have better approval ratings than you in some cases in the halls of science. Now, but these people, mathematicians, physicists, have been emailing me, and they say that the paper you have put up there is of great substance, great importance, deserves study, and nobody, even the people who hate your guts, have said that, have poo-pooed it. None of them.
Well, that's because science is democracy. And the ultimate purest democracy, it doesn't matter what personality you carry, or what baggage you carry, or whether somebody likes, the cut of your beard. The bottom cruel line of the universe is, if it works, it's real. If it doesn't, it's not. And the thing we're going to get to tonight, beyond the theory, beyond the ideas, what Tom is bringing to the table is a whole series of engineering capability, implications for real machines and real devices and real breakthroughs and real-world implications for putting this hyperdimensional physics to work.
Yeah, I always ask you about that. Application. In other
That's
words,
where we're going to go tonight.
Oh, really? What can we do if hyperdimensional physics is real and the power can indeed be harnessed? What can we do with it?
Thomas?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer is you can do just about anything you wish to once you develop the technology. Let me explain just a little bit. We have actually two things ongoing in the discussion so far. One, the dimensionality of a model. A dimension is really not that extraordinary. It's just a degree of freedom, basically, when you come down. Something can vary in a certain direction. And mathematicians can work in any number of dimensions that you wish. But if you cut down the number of dimensions, what you're really cutting down is you're freezing the system more and more. You're not allowing it to vary or to function like it really could function.
Right. For example, if a human could only move in 2 dimensions, you'd be very limited.
You'd run around on the surface of the ground on a flat table. You'd never be able to climb a tree.
Exactly.
And it'd be hard to get away from the saber tooth that way. In other words, it does have some practical use. That third dimension does. So
I'll bear that in mind when I go to Africa next.
Right. But the thing is that we talk about then what...
Art, if we all lived in 2 dimensions, you wouldn't have taken your fall the other night.
It's true, but I wouldn't have had a porch either.
That's true.
This gives the audience some idea of what dimensions are all about.
The other thing you have is any model, any kind of theory, like the theory of electrodynamics or something, you pick a particular algebra that you embed the theory in. Now, an algebra is like a chessboard. It's got a certain fixed domain. It's got a certain set of functions that you're allowed to do. It's like a game, a special game that's been constructed.
Tom, let me interrupt just for a second. It's also like a language.
That's right. It's also like a language.
If you were constricted to Pidgin English to describe Samoan sunset, obviously your audience wouldn't get the point. But if you have the King's English, or you have Latin, or you have, Shakespeare, you can be much richer in metaphor and texture and subtlety and nuance. I mean, the Eskimos have how many words just for ice?
Yes.
So mathematics and algebra is like a language in that the richer it is, the more you can use it to describe the real reality that surrounds us.
Well, the functions that come out of it, the more functions that it has, that makes it a higher topology algebra. Topology, all that means is look at it like a little flat piece of paper, only now you're able to stretch it and pull it like a rubber sheet and twist it and tie it in knots and so forth.
Well, here's a good analogy, Tom. Before we split the atom, we theorized, we did the math, and we decided the atom could be split, but we didn't know it for sure until we did it. Nevertheless, the math forecasted the fact that we were going to be able to split the atom. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. As a matter of fact, Campbell, in the old magazine today, it's called Analog. It was called Astounding Science Fiction then. During the war, he just checked out some physics books, and he put together a little article about how to build an atomic bomb. Startled the entire Manhattan Project. Because he was right on, except he didn't know what the critical mass of uranium was.
Well, all I'm trying to get to here is, if we can forecast the splitting of an atom mathematically, then we can forecast Richard's hyperdimensional physics and what they're going to mean to us mathematically as well. And that's really what you're saying, I think.
Yes, and in particle physics particularly, you have to keep adding dimensions because you can't get all the crazy particles in that keep coming out of the experiments unless you do open up the model. You can't just stay in a fixed small number of dimensions. About the least you can get away with is about 11, and I think now it's up higher than that.
All right. Now, one big question is how we prove all this. And Richard really tantalized me with something. He said to me the other day, hey, Art, our deep probe spacecraft are not acting as they should act, given known physics. And I said, what? He said, yeah, gravitationally, there are anomalies that simply cannot be explained. And there's big news about our deep probe spacecraft. So when we get back, I think I want to head in that direction and see if that underscores the hyperdimensional side of physics and the other dimensions. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So that's the teaser line right there, folks. Our deep probe spacecraft have been found to be not operating as they should. In other words, defying the laws of known physics. Now, how can that be? Well, easy. There's something we don't know. I'm Art Bell, and This is Coast to Coast AM. Don't touch that dial. Going to cover deep probe spacecraft in a moment, but actually I'm going to preempt even that discussion for a second. Something we should have done at the beginning of the program, and I will now do. I'll do it by reading the following facts from Ontario in Canada. Dear Art, I would like to talk about John Holloman as unfinished business from last week. Like yourself, I too was very saddened to hear about his death. You know, I've watched him over the years and always looked forward to his upbeat, enthusiastic reporting style. Was glad for him when he was given the exciting space shuttle program to cover. You mentioned you'd be talking to Richard Hoagland Monday night tonight. Could you please ask him what he thinks of the vagueness and too few details given out about John's death? How it occurred. A man who survived so many earlier worldly close calls, to be taken out that close to home in such a manner doesn't make sense to me. Upon hearing the news after the initial shock wore off, the first question I found myself asking was, what was it that forced John to take such a profound risk on the road that day? He knew the road well, traveled it often, knew there was a no-passing rule along that stretch of road. He was an intelligent, seasoned man, it seemed to me, who would just simply not take his life, his son's, into his hands unless he felt it was absolutely necessary. And the silly reason reported to People magazine just doesn't cut it somehow. Could someone else have been involved? Was something weighing heavily on his mind that perhaps distracted him? There really are many questions. And Richard, we can't let the night go by without letting you say something about John Holloman.
Well, first of all, I was, as everybody else, shocked. I mean, you were the one to call me and basically call my attention to the CNN bulletin, and you know I was stunned. I had been looking forward to John and Walter getting together. There had been some discussion, very low-key, of maybe me doing something on the mission with Walter and with John, just because it would have been so neat, so nostalgic, and it was something that we were keeping very quiet, and that obviously has all been cut short now. But in terms of the facts, sir, we don't want to leap to the sensational. You know, there are times when things so bizarre just happen. What I find equally bizarre is that a few minutes after our, read us the details that we could get from the Constitution and from CNN of John's death, he walks out his front porch and it's not there, and he almost killed himself.
Yeah.
And it was really, you deserve a Darwin, because...
I know.
But that's what entropy does. Not everything is logical, not everything is rational, not everything looks like it makes any sense at all, and senseless tragedies happen all around us every day. As you know, I am spring-loaded to look for the C word,
Sure.
And I am trying very hard not to, just because if we squander precious resource of searching for the truth, and when we find it, announcing it, talking about it, we devalue that coin, and we can never retrieve the value.
All right, well, we'll leave it there, but indeed, for all of us, it was very sad. John Holloman is a big loss. He was a friend. All right, we'll leave it right there for now. Now, our deep space probes. I hope I'm going down the right...
Absolutely.
I am.
Timing is impeccable.
Good. Tom, something is weird with our deep space probes. What's going on?
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't actually studied the space probe itself. I've been confining most of my work to energy and to some medical applications. And so I haven't looked at the probe itself. I do know that from the weaponry aspects, some very strange kinds of weapons are being used right now, which do affect the local potential of the space-time itself.
What?
So it may be that you're having some effect like that, but that's That's just a guess. I simply haven't looked at it.
Oh, Jehoshaphat. Well, we're going to come back to that one.
We will
Believe me.
definitely come back to that. Let me try to give some context. I called you up and I sent this fax to you, which had been sent to me, by the way, by an old colleague of ours, Ken Johnston.
Yes.
Former Boeing engineer, former test astronaut, who's been a member of Enterprise now for some years. In the very distinguished journal, mainstream science journal, The New Scientist, published in Britain,
Right.
on September 12th, a remarkable article appeared. In fact, it's so remarkable that what we've done is have our ace webmaster, Keith Rowland, has got up on our website, at the top of the Enterprise Mission website, accessible through the Art Bell website, a short link directly to the New Scientist gravity article I'm going to describe in a moment. So just go to artbell.com and you'll find my name, and you can go to Enterprise, or you can go to Enterprise directly at www.enterprisemission.com. At the very top of the home page, and now hear this, you will see a report on a NASA solar gravity anomaly, which appears to confirm, additionally, the hyperdimensional model. There's a link directly to the New Scientist article.
Okay, but a NASA solar gravity anomaly.
That's right.
Break that one down to English.
Okay, for several years, an old friend of mine at JPL, John Anderson, who is, together with Tom Van Flandern, probably one of the preeminent celestial mechanics experts in the solar system.
Yes, sir.
John and I worked together with Jim Warwick back during the Voyager days on the anomalies found in Saturn's rings, and there was a whole little synergistic thing that the three or four of us did that resolved that there was something really wondrous and bizarre embedded in the main ring of Saturn found during the 1980 and 81 flybys by the Voyager spacecraft. At that time, John was beginning a project at JPL to track the outer solar system missions. We have sent now 2 Pioneer spacecraft beginning in the early 70s,
That's right.
2 Voyagers beginning in the mid-70s.
Right.
We've now got a Ulysses probe that went in the late 70s, early 80s, and we've got a Galileo mission that started in the 80s and wound up in 95 going into orbit around Jupiter. All these spacecraft are being tracked by means of radio signals.
Correct.
The way we know where they are is we, meaning science, has a general model. It's actually now called the JPL ephemeris for how gravity in the solar system behaves. And it applies to the sun, applies to every planet, every moon. It's basically how you navigate between Earth and Moon back when we used to go to Earth and Moon back during my Cronkite days.
Okay, now you're losing me a little. We know where the spacecraft is based on a model.
We have a model of how gravity works.
Does that? What are we seeing here? That the various gravitational pulls of stars or planets or planets.
Exactly, it's the solar system and the bodies in it.
Should affect the spacecraft in a very known way at a known distance.
Down to, we're talking 8-9 decimals. All right.
Okay.
It's extraordinary precision.
All right.
And it's based on the theoretical model that comes out of Einstein with minor relativity corrections, and based on what's called radio tracking.
Okay.
The spacecraft is sending a signal back to Earth. That signal, depending upon how fast the spacecraft is moving, has a certain frequency.
Correct.
If it's moving away, the frequency is lower. The pitch is lower. If it's moving toward you, the pitch gets higher.
So you have a constant Doppler effect.
You have a Doppler, right, a Doppler tracking. There's also what's called a range tracking. It's kind of like standing on the side of a canyon and going, hello, and then you hear a few seconds later, hello, hello, hello.
Right.
The echo.
Right.
So a spacecraft gets the signal. It doesn't reflect it. It basically it regurgitates it. It absorbs it. It retransmits it with a time hack, with a time code.
Right.
So that the computers on the ground know when the signal that went from Earth got to the spacecraft and when it came back.
Right.
Based on those 2 tracking methods, we know where spacecraft are supposed to be all over the solar system.
And
there are dozens of spacecraft being tracked every single day by NASA's Deep Space Network.
I understand. So what's wrong?
Well, in this article, John and his colleagues report that for these 4 or 5 spacecraft that I named, the Pioneers and the Galileo and Ulysses,
yes,
they're apparently closer than they should be. Meaning that the solar...
Meaning closer to us?
Closer to the sun. Well, us and the sun at that distance, we're talking billions of miles out there. We're so close to the sun that it's basically to us as well as the sun.
So you're saying they're not as far out as they should be?
They have not traveled as far as they should. They have been slowed down by some mysterious force, meaning in this article that the calculated model of the sun's gravity field is different than it should be. So, of course, this caught my attention because one of the key predictions of the hyperdimensional model is, guys, gravity, Earth, Moon, Mars, wherever, sun must change over time. It is not constant. So that's what I reported to you, and that's what I sent to you, and that's what Tom and I and Tom Van Planner were discussing the other night. And tonight I have some new news.
Yes.
Because it is my contention, and Tom wants me to be qualified on this, so I'm going to be very scientific, and I'm going to follow your prescription, Tom.
Okay.
It is my contention that NASA may, in fact, be wrong. That there's nothing wrong with gravity. That, in fact, the gravity of the sun, instead of getting stronger, as this article implies, should be getting weaker. Now, why do I say that? Because if you go back to the paper that you talked about a few minutes ago on the web,
yes,
there are experiments in laboratories all over the Earth indicating that G, the force of gravity between objects, is getting weaker. Now, Tom may have something to say on that in a few minutes.
By that, do you mean all gravity?
Well, the laboratories are here on Earth, all right? But the presumption would be in the model that if gravity on Earth is getting weaker, then gravity all over the solar system should be getting weaker. It's very hard to imagine in a natural model that the sun's gravity would get stronger and the Earth's gravity would get weaker.
And so you're saying if gravity universally, as we understand it, is becoming weaker, that would account for what's